that, let's welcome in Kyle Crabb's NFL draft expert. Kyle, how you doing, man?
I'm doing great. How you guys doing?
Wonderful. Kyle, what is this change that now Bryce Young is now the heavy favorite to be the number one pick? Do you agree with that? And what has changed that?
I think this is that perfect time of year where anything that's out there is out there for a reason. And it's all kind of the gamesmanship. And we've heard some rumors that Houston, Bryce Young might be their only guy. And if they don't get Bryce Young, that they might be interested in potentially moving down the board. So then you ask yourself, okay, is this Carolina now getting cute with Houston to try to prompt and steal an extra pick because Houston was in talks with Chicago and then they balked at trading up. So it's all that misinformation season. And then from the book's perspective too, right? Like if they can take advantage of the misinformation that's out there to change the odds and kind of hedge themselves with the actual outcomes on Thursday night in a couple of weeks. It's all part of the gamesmanship this time of year, and it's lying season at its best. So I'm enjoying the ride, and I'm trying not to read too much in between the lines.
So who would you say, if you had to pick, who you think going number one?
I think it's Stroud. Okay. I think CJ has the most translatable skill set as far as what you're asking a quarterback to do at the next level to what he did at Ohio State. I know people will look at the helmet and they'll say, oh, Ohio State quarterbacks, but just turn on the film, right, and watch what he's capable of doing. And, you know, the story of recent Ohio State quarterbacks is still unwritten because we're still figuring out what Justin Fields is capable of doing in Chicago, too. So I've been more impressed with Stroud, his style of play, as I've continued to watch the tape of not just the quarterbacks, but other position groups and kind of watching them in peripherals, that I think CJ has the most direct translation. And for Carolina, look, they've been beating around the bush on potentially going out and getting a quarterback for like 5-6 years now. And you want to make sure you have a certain floor of what that player is going to be. And that's not to say that CJ Stroud's not a high ceiling player either, but I would want to know with the utmost confidence what I am getting with that investment if I was Carolina.
Kyle, we look at, with the quarterbacks, you mentioned C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young. Anthony Richardson, you hear his name creeping up. Mm-hmm. You hear a guy like Will Levis. Oh, Will Levis is creeping up. I don't know what he's doing. He looks like an American gladiator right now. I don't know if he's doing extra push-ups, but these four quarterbacks seem to be getting a lot of movement. Could you see 4 quarterbacks taken in the first 4 picks?
Yeah, I think the pathway to that is Houston being in position to get whatever their guy is, whether that's Bryce Young or somebody else. And then the Raiders potentially trading up in front of the Colts for a quarterback because they've been very hot on the 30 visits for all of the quarterback prospects, bringing them in. And the Jimmy G contract, you can look at it and say, oh, it's a significant amount of money. It's about $25 million per season across 3 years. But really the first year of it's guaranteed, and that's it. So I think the Raiders are kind of the team that if you're going to get 4, it's the Raiders willing to play a price to go to 3 that the Colts wouldn't pay to play defense and just trade up to 3 preventatively to prevent somebody from jumping them to get the 4th of the 4 quarterbacks. But it's a very binary thing. It's the haves or the have-nots. And if you don't have a quarterback, and these teams that we're talking about don't, life for you is going to be very difficult to win on a consistent basis until you get one. So now's the time if you're in striking range.
Kyle, what's going to happen to Jalen Carter?
Man, I wish I knew. It feels like there's one of these guys every year that is a consensus top 3 player, and then you get into this draft process, and a large portion of the draft process is teams poking holes in your resume and trying to find reasons not to draft you. Now, how much of this with Jalen Carter is legitimate of concern to teams? That's to be determined. I do know he's declining visits from teams not currently scheduled to pick inside the top 10, according to his agent. And that gives me a pretty good sense that somebody in the top 10 is going to love him enough to pick him, where he might not go 3, where that may have been considered chalk when the draft order was set. But I still think that he's going to probably hear himself off in the first 10 picks just based on the talent, and it's going to be a matter of who's comfortable with the things that have come up with him as far as the effort and, of course, the off-the-field stuff with him that came out kind of in front of the national championship game.
Kyle, is Jahmyr Gibbs good enough to go in the first round? Obviously, we know that Bijan Robinson is one of those guys that's probably going to go first round. We know the running back value has diminished over the past few years, but Jahmyr Gibbs is one of those guys that is a good running back, also catches the ball out the backfield, can run routes. Is he good enough to sneak up in that first round?
I think in the right situation, yes. Now you think about Philadelphia, who's picking at 30. That's a team that needs a running back. They just lost Miles Sanders to Carolina in free agency it was a pretty impressive deal. I think it was around $7.5 million per year, something in that ballpark. And they brought in Rashad Penny on a 1-year deal. They largely don't have a player there to step into that role, and you're going to want as many bodies as you can in the backfield to make sure that when you use Jalen Hurts with his legs, it's effective, but you're not putting too much on his plate in that capacity. So I think if he does sneak in, a team like Philadelphia would be the right spot. Eagles fans will tell you, hey, Howie Roseman would never do that. He'd never draft a linebacker in the first round. He'd never draft a running back in the first round, all about positional value. But the Eagles are kind of at a spot where I think they're kind of playing with house money. They were expected to lose at least one of their two corners. They brought them both back, so they've kind of axed that need off of their list of urgent things to address. And because of that, I think maybe they are in a position to draft a player like Jahmyr, because you're absolutely right. The mismatch ability that he has to line up in the backfield or line up in the slot and get really creative with the things that you do with him before the snap and then manufacture him touches, plus his instincts as a runner in general to be able to actually carry the ball in a traditional role, adds up to somebody who should take a significant amount of snaps early on in his pro career.
Kyle, I've been looking forward to these little 3 picks. I think Brown's got 74, 98.
Are you going to ask this man who they're taking at 74?
No.
Okay.
I'm asking. No, I was asking 111. I wanted to know pick 111.
What's the one after that?
I'm like, is there a linebacker? Or we need a linebacker. I would take another speedy receiver. Is there anybody worth packaging picks up to move into the second round range for a linebacker that could give me somebody that I could play today that might be ready to play immediately, and a speed receiver that's still available that could add some down the field threats for Deshaun Watson if I want to package those 2 picks to get up to the second round?
Yeah, I think the linebacker group's a really good opportunity where one of the top testers in the group was Jack Campbell from Iowa, and he's very different from Owusu-Koramoah as kind of the best of the bunch that I think is in-house for Cleveland right now, where Owusu-Koramoah is a little undersized. He's a space guy. Campbell's more of a traditional stack linebacker with a lot of length, but surprised everybody with how well he tested athletically. So that's someone, if he gets past the picks in the late 20s, he may end up, just based off positional value and linebackers in general not being a premium position, sliding to the middle of the second round. And if you want to put the picks together, and it might take a 2024 pick in addition to go up and get that done, I think Campbell's the name that really moves the needle at the linebacker position for somebody who's different than the guys that you have in-house and would be a definitive upgrade over whether it's Jacob Phillips or Anthony Walker. I think he's pro ready. The instincts are off the charts there. He's been a starter for like 3 seasons now. I think Jack Campbell's your guy at linebacker if you want to make a splash. As far as speed receiver goes, I think there's a lot of really attractive options. If you want speed, Scott from Cincinnati, Tyler Scott, I think is a really good name to watch here, as kind of an unheralded name. If Josh Downs from North Carolina gets into the middle of the second round as well, he's not big, but he's actually surprisingly good in contested catch situations for a guy who's 5'9", 175, but he's got the speed, and I think he's versatile where you can line him up in the slot or you can line him up at Z on the perimeter and ask him to run deeper developing routes. And, of course, you think about Watson and the success that he had in Houston with Will Fuller as kind of having that guy in-house. I see enough parallels there where I think Downs could be a name to watch if you wanted to go up, make a splash, and not covet having a bunch of picks, but having more impactful picks that are fewer.
Kyle, I know we're not going to ask you to predict who's there at 74, but I did the work for you, and I went through as many mock drafts as I could find this morning for Browns projections at number 74. Of these 5 options, which one do you think would fit into what the Browns – like which one of these 5 projected mocks at 74 do you think is the best fit for the Browns?
I like Derek Hall quite a bit. I think he has a pretty high ceiling. He's a little stiff, but he is somebody who has a lot of power. I think he would complement Myles Garrett pretty well. I think he'd be a good change-up pace from Agbo Okoronkwo as well, who obviously Cleveland signed in free agency. He's a little bit more undersized, speed rusher type. Derek Hall, prototypical build. So if I'm looking at positional value, if I'm looking at the value of those players, I think Derek Hall, who has kind of gotten stagnant a little bit. There was a long time there at the end of the regular season in college football where you thought this might be a first-round pick. That's a guy that kind of has my eye that I would like out of those 5 options.
And Kyle, one more real quick. One of my favorite parts of the draft are all of the descriptive words they use to describe offensive linemen. Hog mollies, they got the oily hips, fast feet, heavy feet, whatever.
Dancing bears.
Do you have a favorite draft term that if you said to someone else outside of the draft context, they'd be like, what the hell are you talking about?
I think the Mayock dancing bear one will always have a soft spot in my heart just because it paints such this vivid picture. And then you see guys that it embodies where they're really stocky, but they're really wide, and they just have this nimbleness about them that I think really hits home. So give me the Mayockism of dancing bears is my favorite draftism.
I got to call a 20-second timeout because Channel 3 WKYC is so pristine. There is a street sweeper cleaning the garage right now. I've never seen that before.
Like they got.
I've actually never seen it either.
The studio is like we're attached to the parking garage. I'm watching a street sweeper go up and down and clean the garage. I don't even clean my garage at home. I've never seen this. I'm mesmerized by this man on the street sweeper. Anyway, sorry.
Is it
Kyle.
a Zamboni? I hear it. I can't see it.
It's a street sweeper. Like it's got the and I got ADD. So Kyle, I have missed the last 3 minutes of our conversation because I'm watching.
I'm just mad I can't see it myself.
It's amazing. I've never seen anything like it. But anyway, how many quarterbacks are going in the first round? Let's go back to quarterbacks. Hendon Hooker. Any shot there? Are we at 4 or 5? Where is it?
I'm selling. I remember it wasn't that too long ago that we were talking about Davis Webb going in the first round, and you get some of these other guys that early April, late March, agent season, trying to pump guys up, gas guys up. There's a lot to like about Hendon Hooker, but he's the quintessential, in my mind, day 2 quarterback to take, where he's an older player. He's coming off of an injury. He's playing in an offense at Tennessee that does things with splits and spacing at the college level that is almost a different game than what you're going to play in the NFL. And he only really took his step when getting into that offense as compared to playing at Virginia Tech. So I'm selling on Hooker. I think you get the other 4 guys in the first round, and you'll have 4 first-round quarterbacks, and they'll all probably be off the board in the top 10.
Well, I see that you are a huge Miami Dolphins fan. With the
what gave it away?
Just so happened to check the background out. So with that being said, with Tua having the concussions, is this the year that y'all look in the draft to draft another quarterback like a Hendon Hooker if he's there day 2, or what do you think they do with their picks?
I think they're going to take this year. They were very quick to exercise the 5th-year option for Tua, and that's pretty rare. Usually the 5th-year options, they don't get pulled until the last week of April or the first week of May, kind of closer to the deadline. But I think the Dolphins have kind of been sick and tired of, after the Brian Flores era, of flirting with trading for Deshaun Watson for 18 months and not dismissing it. Mike McDaniel really believes in this guy if he can stay healthy, and I think they wanted to kind of put it to bed early this year. So I think their effort this year will be, hey, can we get an offensive lineman? They've got 2 needs on the offensive line at left guard and right tackle. Can we get a tight end in the building? Can we go out and get a defensive tackle or a linebacker? They have 2 day 2 picks, try to get players that can contribute this year, and then let Tua prove he could stay healthy on the 5th-year option next year or going into his 4th year, and then make the decision long-term once they get back to having a refilled draft capital, because they traded a 1 for Bradley Chubb and they traded a 1 for Tyreek Hill and a bunch of stuff in the last 12 months. So I think they'll ride this year out and let Tua kind of decide for him with how healthy he can stay this year.
Kyle, when you look at the, really quickly before we let you go, when you look at the playoffs, right? If you had to take a look at the AFC, which teams do you think are most susceptible of not making the playoffs that made it last year?
Oh, man. I think we need to figure out what the heck's going on with Lamar Jackson in Baltimore, and obviously the Odell Beckham signing is a promising step because he and Lamar hopped on the phone and we're chatting it up. I think Jacksonville's a good bet. I'd be interested to see what the Chargers are able to do with some of their weak spots. They're going to be in a more competitive division this year. I think the Broncos will be much better than they were last year. But the Chargers have to get better on the defensive line and run defense, and they've had some attrition from a talent perspective. So I think the Chargers are one to watch just because of playing in the West that I think will be better. And then obviously if Aaron Rodgers comes to the AFC East, you have to acknowledge the Dolphins as potentially being the third team in the AFC East if they're not able to stay healthy in key spots as well. So I look at Baltimore, Miami, and Los Angeles and say those are three teams that one of them is definitely going to be out just based off law of averages, but we'll see which one doesn't break the right way.
Kyle, good stuff from you. We'll talk to you hopefully soon. And hopefully your Dolphins don't perform as good as the Browns. We're just going to keep it honest with you because we would like your spot. We would like to be in the playoffs, so that's just why.
Wait. Before we let Kyle go, Kyle, I have one question. You may not know the answer to this. How long have you been doing like detailed scouting reports on players coming out of the draft?
2013, so about 10 years now.
Yes.
So let's go back to 2016.
Yes.
Then. Did you happen to have a scouting report on one Tyvis Powell, a safety from Ohio State?
I'd have to dig into the archives. I remember watching the name. I remember writing some notes down. Was definitely blue chip prospect, top of the first round kind of guy from my memory off the top of my head.
Really?
God bless you.
You know what?
You know what?
You know what? I'm cutting your ass.
This man has got so much credibility. You know what? They need Mel Kiper and them need to move aside and let you just go ahead and be that guy because you recognize true talent.
I just changed them. I'm keeping Tiger and I'm cutting your ass.
This dude, man.
Kyle, thank you so much, man. Appreciate it.
Made this day, Kyle.
I appreciate you guys. Let's chat soon.
All right.